to Creepy True Stories, where reality takes a spine-tingling twist. Brace yourselves for a journey into the unknown, as we unearth chilling tales and unsolved mysteries that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Prepare to be captivated, intrigued, and haunted by the truth, because here, the darkness has a story to tell.
Story 1: The Dollmaker's Curse. In the heart of Mexico, within the labyrinthine canals of Xochimilco, lies the infamous Island of the Dolls. It is a place shrouded in mystery, where the eerie melodies of its folklore are carried by the gentle winds rustling through the twisted branches of the gnarled trees. The island's history is a tapestry of the bizarre, and it is here that our first chilling tale begins. In the midst of a sultry summer, Maria, a young and inquisitive anthropologist, ventured to the Island of the Dolls. She was fascinated by the stories that surrounded the island, and her academic curiosity propelled her to uncover its secrets. Armed with her notebook, camera, and an unrelenting desire for knowledge, she set foot on the island. As she explored the eerie landscape, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The countless dolls, their glassy eyes reflecting the muted sunlight, seemed to follow her every move. Despite her unease, she pressed on, documenting the dolls' peculiar positions and eerie expressions. Hours passed, and as evening descended, Maria heard faint, childlike laughter echoing from the dense undergrowth. Goosebumps prickled on her skin as she followed the sound deeper into the island. There, she discovered a dilapidated shack, its wooden walls groaning with age. Inside, she found an old man named Raphael, the island's sole inhabitant and caretaker of the dolls. He was a frail, wiry figure, his eyes deeply etched with sorrow. With a voice trembling like the leaves on the trees outside, he began to unravel the story of the island. Raphael explained that the dolls were offerings to appease the spirit of a little girl who had tragically drowned in the canal years ago. He claimed that the dolls were cursed and that they whispered secrets to him in the dead of night. They told him about the souls they had trapped within their lifeless bodies, longing to be set free. Maria, ever the skeptic, dismissed his claims and decided to stay the night on the island, determined to prove that there was a rational explanation. She set up her camp in the shadow of the shack, her camera trained on the dolls. As the moon hung high in the sky, Maria was roused from her fitful slumber by the eerie rustling of the trees. She switched on her camera and aimed it at the dolls. To her astonishment, their eyes began to glow with an otherworldly light, and they turned their heads in unison to look directly at her. Then, they spoke. "Help us," they whispered in chilling unison. "We are trapped in this purgatory." But as Maria's trembling fingers tried to capture this supernatural event, the dolls turned their attention away from her and gazed at Raphael's shack. With a collective, eerie voice, they beckoned him to come. Tears welled up in Raphael's eyes, and he rose from his bed, as if compelled by an unseen force. Maria could only watch in horror as he walked into the darkness, the spectral dolls leading the way. The following morning, Maria was alone on the island. The shack and the dolls were gone, as if they had never existed. All that remained was an unsettling silence, broken only by the wind that whispered through the trees. No one ever saw Raphael or the dolls again, and Maria's footage, while it captured the strange events, was deemed a hoax by skeptics. But Maria knew the truth. She had glimpsed the inexplicable. The dolls and their curse remained, hidden from the world, on Mexico's creepiest haunting grounds. The night grew darker as Maria remained on the Island of the Dolls, alone except for the eerie company of the forsaken dolls. She had witnessed the inexplicable, and the rational explanations she once clung to were crumbling in the face of this supernatural phenomenon. The wind whispered through the trees, creating an unsettling symphony of voices. Maria's fear only deepened as she recalled the tales of the dolls coming to life at night. Her unease grew as she realized that the dolls were indeed moving, their limbs creaking and swaying with unnatural, puppet-like motions. As Maria trained her camera on the animated dolls, they began to communicate with each other in hushed, chilling whispers. Their porcelain faces, cracked and weather-worn, twisted into grotesque expressions of pain and longing. Their glassy eyes glistened with an eerie light, and Maria felt their collective gaze locking onto her. One doll, in particular, stood out. It was the largest of them all, seated on a makeshift throne of tattered cloth. Its crown of matted hair framed its porcelain face, and its eyes seemed to harbor a sinister intelligence. Maria cautiously approached it, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "You are more than just dolls, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. To her astonishment, the doll's lips curled into a grotesque smile, revealing chipped teeth. It didn't speak, but its gaze was piercing, and Maria sensed that it held secrets beyond her comprehension. With trembling hands, she reached out to touch the doll. The moment her fingers brushed the cold porcelain, the doll sprang to life. Its contorted face twisted into an expression of malevolence, and it released a blood-curdling scream that shattered the silence of the island. The other dolls joined in, their haunting cries creating a discordant symphony of torment. The dolls leaped from their perches, their twisted limbs moving in a grotesque parody of dance. Maria stumbled backward, terror seizing her. The malevolent doll's voice hissed through the night air, "Join us." Icy fingers closed around Maria's wrist, and she tugged and fought, but the doll's grip was unbreakable. Suddenly, the world around her began to warp and contort. The island transformed into a nightmarish carnival, and she found herself surrounded by a horde of dolls, each with a ghastly expression. As the dolls closed in, their voices melded into a chilling chorus of despair. Maria screamed, the sound echoing through the island. Her cries became a desperate plea for help as the doll's grip tightened. In that darkest hour, the island's tragic history enveloped her, and the souls of the dolls became one with her consciousness. Maria's identity vanished, consumed by the curse that bound these tortured spirits. On the mainland, the boatman who had brought her to the island heard her harrowing cries, but it was too late. When he finally reached the island, there was no sign of Maria, only the haunting laughter of the dolls. She had become a part of the island of the dolls, a prisoner of its dark and sinister secrets. The island remained a chilling testament to the supernatural, where the souls of the deceased and the damned intertwined with the world of the living. The legend of the island of the dolls continued to haunt those who ventured there, a place where the boundary between life and death blurred, and where the spirits of the dolls forever whispered their eerie secrets to those who dared to listen. Story 2: The Haunting Serenade. The legend of the island of the dolls had reached the far corners of Mexico, and travelers from all over the world came to witness its eerie spectacle. Among them was a group of friends, Carlos, Isabella, and Javier. They sought adventure and excitement, eager to confront the island's eerie aura. Little did they know, their journey would be one that left them forever scarred. The three friends embarked on a moonlit boat ride, guided by a weathered mariner with stories etched into the lines of his face. The journey down the dark canals was peaceful, with the lily pads and the moon casting silver glimmers across the water's surface. But as they approached the island, the atmosphere shifted. An unsettling tension filled the air, and the dolls, suspended from the branches, began to sway, their haunting giggles punctuating the silence. The mariner docked the boat, and the friends disembarked onto the island. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing the grotesque faces of the dolls. As they explored, the dolls seemed to beckon them deeper into the island, whispering promises of secrets untold. Carlos, the daredevil of the group, took it upon himself to prove his bravery by approaching the largest doll on the island. It sat atop a throne of tattered rags, a crown of matted hair framing its face. Its glassy eyes glistened in the flashlight's beam, and it appeared to be crying tears of cobwebs. "You're just a doll," Carlos scoffed, reaching out to touch its cold porcelain skin. But before his hand made contact, the doll's eyes snapped open, revealing a sickly shade of green. It let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the trees, sending chills down the spines of the group. Then, the dolls began to sing. Their voices, high and eerily childlike, wove together in a haunting serenade that seemed to emanate from every direction. It was a song of loss, of tragedy, and of a deep yearning for release from their porcelain prisons. Javier, overcome by fear, fled back to the boat, leaving Isabella and Carlos behind. They watched in horror as the dolls descended from their perches, their cracked lips forming words of desperation. "Free us," they begged, their voices a cacophony of anguish. "Free us from this curse." Carlos, paralyzed with terror, finally managed to break free from the doll's gaze. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding. It was then that he noticed Isabella had not moved. She stood before the doll on the throne, her face devoid of emotion. As Carlos approached her, he realized that her eyes were the same unnatural shade of green as the doll's. She turned to him with a vacant stare and whispered, "I will set them free." Before he could react, Isabella plunged a knife into her own chest, her blood spattering on the doll's porcelain face. The doll let out a triumphant shriek as Isabella crumpled to the ground, lifeless. In his grief and shock, Carlos ran to the boat and urged the mariner to leave the island. They sped away, leaving behind the haunting dolls and the tragic fate of Isabella. The island's legend endured, and the friend's disappearance became another chilling chapter in the story of Mexico's creepiest haunting grounds. Carlos, paralyzed with terror, finally managed to break free from the doll's gaze. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding. It was then that he noticed Isabella had not moved. She stood before the doll on the throne, her face devoid of emotion. As Carlos approached her, he realized that her eyes were the same unnatural shade of green as the doll's. She turned to him with a vacant stare and whispered, "I will set them free." Before he could react, Isabella plunged a knife into her own chest, her blood spattering on the doll's porcelain face. The doll let out a triumphant shriek as Isabella crumpled to the ground, lifeless. In his grief and shock, Carlos ran to the boat and urged the mariner to leave the island. They sped away, leaving behind the haunting dolls and the tragic fate of Isabella. The island's legend endured, and the friend's disappearance became another chilling chapter in the story of Mexico's creepiest haunting grounds. Carlos returned to the mainland, forever scarred by the harrowing events on the island of the dolls. He told the authorities about the terrifying ordeal, but the authorities dismissed his story as a hallucination brought on by fear. Haunted by the loss of his friend, Carlos dedicated his life to uncovering the mysteries of the supernatural. He delved into the folklore of Mexico, seeking answers to the enigma of the island of the dolls. Over the years, he encountered countless accounts of paranormal activity and inexplicable disappearances associated with the island. Carlos became a recluse, his obsession with the dolls consuming him. He revisited the island innumerable times, hoping to make contact with the tormented spirits. Some said he even began to resemble the dolls he had encountered on that fateful night. The legend of Carlos and Isabella's eerie encounter on the island of the dolls spread far and wide, becoming a cautionary tale for those who sought to explore the paranormal. The island remained a place of darkness, a place where the souls of the deceased and the cursed continued to weave their chilling tales into the fabric of Mexico's creepiest haunting grounds. Story 3: The Whispering Shadows. Our final tale takes us back to the enigmatic island of the dolls, where a group of thrill-seekers dared to unravel the mysteries of this ominous place. Among them was Alejandro, a seasoned paranormal investigator, and his team of researchers. Their quest was to document the supernatural occurrences on the island, and they were armed with state-of-the-art equipment to capture any unexplained phenomena. As the boat approached the island, a sense of foreboding washed over the group. The dolls hung from the trees, like grotesque ornaments, swaying in the breeze. They disembarked and set up their equipment under the shadow of the gnarled trees. The night was still, and the researchers' equipment detected no unusual readings. Frustration began to mount as they anticipated an uneventful expedition. Alejandro, however, believed in the legends and was determined to unveil the island's secrets. He ventured further into the heart of the island, trailed by his team. In a clearing, he found a dilapidated, overgrown playground. The dolls were everywhere, their lifeless eyes watching with an eerie intensity. Alejandro felt the weight of their collective gaze upon him, and he began to conduct an EVP session, asking the dolls if they had any messages. The response was unexpected. The air grew cold, and the wind carried a whisper, the voice of a child. "Help me," it pleaded. As Alejandro listened, the shadows cast by the dolls seemed to stretch and twist. One shadow detached itself from the rest, forming a small, dark figure. It was a spectral child, with hollow eyes that seemed to mirror the dolls around it. The child spoke of the curse that bound them, revealing that they were trapped souls seeking release. They spoke of a darkness that had settled over the island, a darkness that had grown stronger over the years. The dolls had become instruments of torment, and the island itself had become a malevolent entity. Alejandro, overwhelmed with empathy, promised to help the child. He asked the spirit how he could break the curse. The child whispered a cryptic riddle, a series of words and symbols that needed to be deciphered. It was a daunting puzzle that promised to reveal the key to the island's torment. The investigators returned to the mainland, and for weeks, they labored to decipher the riddle. It led them on a quest that took them deep into Mexico's history and folklore. The symbols they uncovered spoke of ancient rituals and dark sacrifices. Finally, they returned to the island of the dolls, armed with the knowledge they had gleaned. They conducted a series of rituals, hoping to release the spirits that had been trapped for so long. The night was filled with eerie phenomena. The dolls wept and screamed, their porcelain faces twisting in agony. Then, in a blinding flash of light, the island itself seemed to convulse. The spirits were freed, and their unearthly cries echoed across the canals. The dolls, once malevolent, now appeared tranquil, their eyes losing their eerie glow. As dawn broke over the island, Alejandro and his team witnessed a chilling sight. The trees, once gnarled and twisted, began to straighten and flourish. The island itself was transforming into a place of peace, no longer haunted by the darkness that had plagued it for so long. But the price of their actions was heavy. Alejandro and his team had inadvertently become part of the island's dark history. Their lives were inexorably linked to the spirits they had released. Their fates were sealed, and they would forever be guardians of the island of the dolls, ensuring that its dark past remained a distant memory. The legend lived on, and the island's haunting grounds now stood as a place of hope, where the souls of the departed could finally find peace. But for those who had dared to uncover the island's secrets, their chilling fate remained, serving as a stark reminder of the price one might pay when confronting the supernatural. The investigators returned to the mainland, determined to decipher the riddle they had uncovered and put an end to the curse of the island of the dolls. The symbols and words they had collected were enigmatic, filled with cryptic meaning and ancient references to dark rituals. Their research led them through dusty archives, cryptic manuscripts, and encounters with local shamans. They learned that the island had a long history of dark legends and curses, some reaching back to ancient Aztec practices. The team, now armed with their newfound knowledge, returned to the island. They conducted a series of rituals they believed would release the trapped spirits, drawing from their research and knowledge. The night was filled with eerie phenomena, as the dolls wept and screamed in anguish, their porcelain faces twisting in torment. Suddenly, the island seemed to convulse with an otherworldly energy. A blinding flash of light enveloped the entire island, and the spirits of the dolls were freed. Their unearthly cries pierced the night, echoing across the canals. The investigators watched in awe and terror as the trees on the island, once gnarled and twisted, began to straighten and flourish. The transformation was extraordinary, and the once malevolent spirits that had plagued the island had finally been laid to rest. As dawn broke over the island, the team left with a sense of accomplishment, believing they had broken the curse that had tormented the island for centuries. The legend surrounding the island of the dolls now held a glimmer of hope, and it appeared that the curse had finally been lifted. But there was a price to pay. the investigators had unknowingly become part of the island's dark history. They had unwittingly become guardians of the Island of the Dolls, ensuring that its dark past remained a distant memory. The spirits of the dolls may have been released, but the investigators were forever bound to the island, unable to leave its haunted grounds. The legend of their fate became an unsettling tale, a stark reminder that confronting the supernatural often came with dire consequences. The Island of the Dolls continued to be a place where myth and reality intertwined, where the line between the living and the dead blurred, and where the human spirit's insatiable curiosity could have chilling repercussions. The island, once a place of haunting darkness, now stood as a place of hope, where the souls of the departed could finally find peace. The legend lived on, with its unsettling twist of fate for those who dared to confront the supernatural on Mexico's creepiest haunting grounds.